So let's talk about the 100 Thieves tournament. Obviously, it was a Gamers for Quality brought to you by Cashapp. TSM didn't make it through groups, neither did Cloud9 or 100 Thieves. And in the finals, it was Sentinels defeating Together We Are Terrific, two teams that you just spoke about. One team is in your top 5. The other team you would say would be in your top 5 out of personal preference. Yep. So Simo, when you break down this tournament here, how much weight do you give a tournament like this, given all that Tyler said, but still the fact that Sentinels won a tournament, TSM, consensus number 1, didn't make it out of groups?
You know, when I think about even specifically the power rankings, there's a lot that I feel like can be missing in a way. There are a lot of teams that are just trying to break it into Fionn's top 10, like Spot Up, Mix Up, Echo 8, Prospects, Charlotte Phoenix. The list is quite endless with how many teams, and really not to mention players that are trying to make it through. You look at a player like Thief. He's been bouncing from team to team. He's an incredible Cypher player. And now he's being tried out by Immortals in place of JC Stanny. And so there are a lot of players, even a player like Som as well, who's trying to navigate through the space and trying to find his way onto a team. That I wonder if you should also have a power ranking show when it relates to players, like the top 10 NA players. And,
you already just announced one show. You want us to announce 2?
Coming on Tuesday night,
But to answer your question, Arda, how much weight do you really give a tournament like this? I think if you have your usual suspects, it does deserve some weight. You have tournaments that have, in some cases, more prize pool than this, but less viewership, and in some cases, less prize pool, but more viewership. And so I don't think it really matters at the end of the day about the scalability of the tournament itself, but rather the performance the teams put on. And considering TSM has been, I wonder if it's just their own strategy to compete in everything and anything, but it gives them the opportunity to go against teams like Charlotte Phoenix, like Echo 8, and have their taste of some weird and funky strats. Team that's going to be competing Oxygen Supremacy, they love Odin. Did they define the Odin meta? Maybe. It's possible, but there's no way that we can know that because Sentinels pulled it out on a bigger stage than a smaller team like Oxygen. So TSM gets to experiment with all these funky little teams, and we get to watch and get to calculate whether or not players are worthy in the top 10 or not.
So yeah, I was just going to say, I think this weekend was a big moment for Sentinels in this tournament, right? Earlier this week, it was a big moment for Sentinels. I don't think any one team has more pressure on it in Valorant than them. I don't mind saying that, right? If you saw I'll go out on a limb here and show my hand a little bit. If you saw earlier this week the Esports Observer article about the average salaries in Valorant, right, and how they ranged from anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 a month. Obviously, this was highly contested among a lot of players and coaches and people in the space that was inaccurate. But I would say, knowing what I know, that Sentinels was not a very cheap team. And they are certainly on one of the higher end of cost in Valorant altogether. That you have to remember what you're dealing with here, right? For great example, Sinatra's rookie contract in Overwatch was $150,000 a year. He got an extension with a raise to play in Season 3 after that 2-year deal was over, right? To put this roster together, they not only had to do some pretty large buyouts to get some of these players, but they also had to actually pay a lot of money in salary, right? And I think that with that said, people knowing that and just looking at the roster and who they recruited, right? They Zom's a great Apex player who was already a part of the org, and Sinatraa, right? They brought in some names that make you think oh wow, you have some really high expectations. And knowing that they were not a cheap team to put together, I think a lot of people are putting pressure on them to perform. This weekend felt like a much needed win, even if some of the teams like 100 Thieves and TSM, trolling's not the right word, but we're not taking it as seriously as they would in an Ignition event.
Hiko's internet also was out, and he had to literally drive to a undisclosed location to play the final game of the tournament. So
yeah,
it was a weird situation. But I do think Sentinels and Together We Are Terrific both deserve praise for how they played, and I think Sentinels is a hard out for any team. I wouldn't put them with the TSM or T1s yet, or even Immortals. I think they're very much on the Immortal stage where they can be up and down, but they are a tough team to play against, and they're just a weird team. Like Dapper, who is their Cypher player, and Sick, their Sage player, are often the top 2 ACS players, the average combat scores, which you don't see. Those are usually your defensive, your lower rank, your lurkers and the people who do the less amount of damage. But Dapper and Sick are a lot of times the point men, the aces of the team, and then you have Sinatraa, who a lot of times will literally not do anything all around except sit in the back with an Odin and just wait for someone to come up and just go brrr and just shoot gun and just spray mindlessly. And he'll get
like an Odin lurk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a weird. It's a very weird team where they don't go by the standard practices of what you would think of a Valorant pro team in terms of like 1 to 5 and what the Duelist does this, the Sentinel does this. Like they play very, very differently, and I'm excited to see that because as Simo said earlier, is that a lot of these teams have a lot of the hive mind, right, where they see TSM or T1 do something well, and they're like, we're going to copy that. Where Sentinels is like, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to go shoot. We're going to wall bang through a wall. We're going to take the Odin, say, hey, Sick, you're Sage. You entry for us. Like, they play such a weird and fun style that I'm actually really happy to see a team that looked really trash early on in the beta phase where they didn't really find an identity. Now they've kind of found this weird rebel misfit identity of playing what they want, doing these weird tactics, and it's working for them. So they're definitely the team to watch in NA right now if you're not looking at T1 or TSM.
Speaking of combat score, the only player that has played over 100 rounds in North America that has a combat score over 300 is TenZ.
Yes. That's not surprising. He is. I mean, many pro players in NA think TenZ is the best player in the region, maybe even the world mechanically. His team though is not that great. So we'll